Hey, it's Rita here, and welcome to the Deliberate Leader podcast for this week. This week, we're changing up our format, and I'm sharing with you 4 questions that I was asked recently by a leader who is looking to explore leading like a coach. I am going to provide a reflection for you based on that conversation that I had based on these 4 questions. So enjoy this podcast, and it's going to be a good one if you are looking at how you can better lead like a coach. See you soon. Welcome to this week's episode of the Deliberate Leader podcast. And this week we're taking a slightly different angle, and we're going to do a Ask Rita session. So 4 questions that have been asked of me lately around leading like a coach. And I'm going to share with you the tips that I gave to that person. So this person, to give you a bit of background, they are a leader that's actually been leading for quite some time, over 10 years actually. And a little bit like a renovation, they're looking at, how do I renovate the way that I lead? They're not looking for wholesale change. So we're not talking about a knock it down, build it back up. We're talking about some enhancements. They really are looking to strengthen connection and engagement with their team. They operate in an environment where talent's actually pretty hard to get. So very specialized industry. And they want to be able to retain, the team that they've got. They really enjoy working with their team. And so this is very much about this leader trying to really enhance the way that they lead, build stronger connections, and explore how they can lead like a coach. So the first question this person asked me is, what does it actually mean to lead like a coach? So they came across my book, You Are How You Lead, and this was a copy that was given to them, and they've gone through the book and kind of had a look at the theory, and they were still focused on, and the question they still had was, well, what does it actually mean to lead like a coach if I'm to take it on? So we went on and had a conversation about sport actually, and we explored, how familiar are you with sports coaching? And they have coached their kids' junior basketball team. And so they've done that actually for many years, 2 children's worth, the eldest and the youngest. And so they have a little bit of experience. They know what it's like to motivate. They know what it's like to understand the different talents in the team and how you need to leverage those different talents to kind of bring it together as a leader. So they've got that experience of coaching. So, whether you're a sports spectator, which is what I said to this person, or whether you are a coach and have coached, maybe even in a sporting domain or in some kind of, community group involvement, the same principles apply. And that is that the way in which you would seek to understand, the talent that you've got in the team, really get to know them, the way that you would go about motivating them, the way that you might leverage their strengths and really get them to connect in with their strengths and what those strengths are. And then the way that you would support is no different when we're doing it from a coaching perspective in leadership. So if you are familiar with sport, then you're starting in a great place, and most of us are, whether it's, as I said, even if we haven't played sport and we're just spectators, there's enough documentaries and there's enough that we even see in the news about coaches, whether it's footy coaches, tennis coaches, round ball, soccer, dare I say it, or real football, that's going to be controversial, coaches, whatever type of coach, that we might be familiar with, the same kinds of principles apply. So we start off with what we know in terms of coaching. So what does it mean like to coach in today's workplaces? Well, we start with, we've really got to know the team. So a leader who coaches will spend time getting to know their team and connecting with their team. This is going to look like building social capital. So checking in, how are things going? We don't really necessarily want to only know them from a work perspective. We want to also know them as a person. And I hope that you're interested in them getting to know you as a person. Because if we only know someone on a quite a superficial level, then we can't really know the person. We can't really know what motivates them, what their strengths are, how we leverage those strengths, and how to handle them, in kind of great times when they're flying because they've had a few wins, but also when they are not and when they've had some things that might feel like losses and challenges. So the first thing, we've really got to connect in with our team. Now, there is a method that we use to do that here at the Deliberate Leader, and that is through empathy mapping. And the concept of empathy mapping is a way for us to develop better empathy with those that we lead. And we do it through asking ourselves a series of questions. There's some templates. So if you want to jump onto the deliberateleader.net and just do a search on empathy mapping, you'll see the templates and a little short recording that I've done on it. But we're asking 4 key questions. We're asking, what are we observing? What are we seeing the person say and do? So what are we observing? What are they saying? What are they saying to us? What might they be saying to others? Then we're also going to capture what we think they're feeling and what we think they're thinking. Yep, you heard that right. What we think they're thinking. Those 2 questions, what they might be feeling and what they might be thinking, are going to appear in our hidden column. So if you've got yourself a piece of paper, that maybe you're walking right now or listening to this in the car, when we're doing our empathy map, we're going to pull out a piece of paper. We're going to ask ourselves 4 questions. We're actually going to quarter our page. And we're going to start with, what do we hear the person say? What do we observe that they're saying? What are we hearing from others that they might be saying? And then we're also going to jot down what we see them doing. So in a performance management situation where, performance is slipping and you're wondering what to do with it as a leader, you're going to be capturing in that first quadrant, what are they saying? Are they skipping one-on-ones? Are they, saying that they didn't have time to do most things? Are they saying that they don't have enough resource? Are they saying that their job's too big? Are they saying that they are not developed enough? What is it that they're saying? And we're really tuning in and trying to listen out for what we know around that. Then we're going to capture what we observe them doing. And so, are they walking in, when we see them either virtually or in person, are they walking with a spring in their step, or do they look like, they're kind of downtrodden and not so springy, not so energetic? So we're going to observe, right? Then we're going to look at what they might be thinking in relation to the issue. So performance, maybe they're thinking that, their job's at risk. Maybe they are thinking that they're being done by and that the world's actually harsh, or you as their leader are harsh. And then we're going to be jotting down what they're feeling. And what they might be feeling is insecure. Maybe they're lacking some confidence. We're going to jot these things down on a piece of paper. Now, when you do this exercise in terms of that empathy map, what will be really insightful for you is how well you think you know the person. It's really hard to be empathetic when we don't understand where the person is coming from. And that requires knowledge, right? It requires us to know stuff about the person. So this could illuminate a whole bunch of gaps that you might have in your knowledge about the person, and that's okay. Because what we're going to do with those gaps is we're going to formulate some questions that we can ask them. And that is going in now to step 2 of how we lead like a coach. And that is, we're going to ask some really great questions. Now, these questions are not going to feel like an interrogation. They're not meant to, so don't design them in that way. They're meant to be conversational style questions. And the distinguishing feature of a conversation is that it's a dialogue, right? We're hearing from both parties, or all the parties that are participating in that dialogue. And we are listening to each other. We're not necessarily putting forward just what we know. We're really listening, actively listening. We're going to ask some questions to deepen our understanding. And we're going to ask questions in the true spirit of curiosity, not being a smarty pants and pretending we know. We're going to be genuinely interested and genuinely curious about their position. So once we've got those questions, then we can go back and start having a dialogue with them. And we should be doing that. That should be a key feature of your team's relationship and your relationship with them. Questions should be a key feature, right? Asking each other questions to learn from each other. And just because you're the leader, it doesn't mean that you don't have anything to learn. In fact, all of us, irrespective of our levels in our organizations, benefit from asking great questions, even at board level. So if I think about me with that board director hat on, we ask questions to deepen our understanding of an issue. We don't go in firing allegations, accusations, judgments about why something is or isn't being done. We're going to get curious. And that really puts us in a position of learning, which is super important. So we're going to ask a bunch of questions. And those questions are dialogue focused, conversational, start them off with a what or a how. A why can be a bit accusatory and judgmental. I'm going to ask a bunch of questions. Now, as a leader, try and ask 2 questions to everyone that you answer. And for some of you, that's going to feel very, very unnatural, because as leaders, we are paid to solve problems. We're paid to give answers. That's why we're in the position of leadership. However, when we are giving those answers away all the time, and it's not to say don't answer a question, but when we are tuned in to only answering questions rather than asking them, we limit what we're learning from those conversations. So we really want to be focused on learning, seeking to understand, minimizing judgment, increasing curiosity. So we're going to ask lots of questions. And once we've done that, we can complete our empathy map, because those questions will give you some insights that you may or may not have been aware of in relation to what the person is doing, why they're doing that thing, what they might be thinking and what they might be feeling. And once we've got that information, we can deepen our level of empathy and connection with that person. We will be understanding where they're coming from. So that's the second aspect, which is asking. The other key features of leading like a coach are about data, and what data are we looking for, and what data are we using as leaders to make decisions. The leaders that I work with, more often than not, and I'm going to put myself into this category, we jump to action and we don't pause often enough and for long enough. And the power of the pause means that we can bring in space for deep reflective thinking. It doesn't need to be a 3-hour thinking session. Good luck to you if you have that, right? That's awesome. But often it's 30 minutes, 10 minutes, making a decision based on some thinking time, which is longer than 60 seconds. We don't have to be impulsive in our answers back. We can take time to pause and think. And when we do that, we can be tuned in. We're listening better. We're observing better. We're making sense of the situation. And in coaching language, that's called calibration. And it's a term that we borrow from neuro-linguistic programming. But effectively, what we're doing is we're looking at all the data points that we have, and then we're assessing what we can do with the information that we have. Super important part of coaching. You want to make sure that you are pausing, reflecting, critically thinking, and then acting or making a decision. The other thing we want to be doing is supporting our people. And support can look very different for different people. So support for some people is let's roll the sleeves up and let's really get in there and provide hands-on support. That's not going to work for everybody. Maybe they want you to back off so they can just do what they need to do. Maybe the support that they need is knowing that you're there, knowing that you've got their back. The best kind of support that you can offer is going to be the support where they are leading you. Your person, the person you are coaching, they are leading you. And the way to get them to lead is to ask them a powerful question. And that is, how can I best support you? And in doing that, you're not presupposing the support that they need. You're asking them. You're maybe not going to be able to provide all the support that they need. So if they said, look, I need you to spot me, I don't know, some money to get me out of a pickle, You may or may not be able to do that, right? If they say, look, I don't really want to do that presentation, so the way that you could best support me is for you to deliver the presentation. You don't have to say yes to those kinds of requests for support. So how can I best support you? Can be a dangerous question because you don't know what you're going to get back, but you can still also have your boundaries in place in terms of what support you're going to be comfortable with. Because if you're going to genuinely provide that support, it needs to be something that you're not going to do so in a resentful way. You're going to be happy for that support. And so if there is a request back that you can't meet, just be honest and say, I'd really love to do that for you, but I can't. Or whatever is going to be genuine for you. You might not really want to do it for them at all, and just explain that to them and why you can't. So in terms of leading like a coach, they're the 4 aspects that you need to remember. We need to connect with people. We need to ask them good questions and great questions that open up dialogue. We need to think about all the data points that we've got. What do we know about this person? And then calibrate that information before we act. And we need to support and provide that support in a way that is going to be about them and not you. Okay, so now we're on to the next question, which this leader asked. And the question I asked is, how does a coaching approach shift the way that leaders handle challenges or underperformance? It's an interesting question, because automatically our mind goes, oh, coaching, conversations, that's soft, right? It's got to be soft. Maybe it is soft, if that's, your definition of soft. But I reckon sometimes those tricky conversations where we're talking about underperformance or challenges, or we're giving someone feedback about their behavior, the behavior that they're having on us or other members of the team, there's nothing soft about that. And I can tell you that they are often the most challenging conversations that leaders tell me that they need to have, and often the ones that we avoid and we don't want to have. So to me, there's nothing soft about that. So let's get that out of our minds from the start. Coaching does not equal soft. You can absolutely still manage performance and expect high performance in your team through coaching. And that's what we want to do. We're doing this for good commercial reason. And when I say commercial, sub in whatever your KPIs and whatever your metrics of success are for your organizational performance. For a charity, that term commercial might not make sense. So you sub in whatever is going to make sense for you if you're working in the not-for-profit sector, for example. There's nothing soft about it. So when we are seeking to have these conversations, and particularly around challenges and underperformance, maybe, we're going to seek to understand. So we go back to our connection, our questions. We're not going to judge why we think they're performing in that way. So we're not going to judge and go, well, it's the lifestyle that they lead, and therefore, how can they perform? No, we're going to suspend all of that judgment. We're going to go in with a true intention to seek to understand. Then we're going to ask some questions. We're going to see what's going on. You know the drill here. We're going to look at the information we've got, and we're going to support. And if we follow that process, even the most challenging of conversations will leave both parties better off, because we're not going in with judgment. We're not going in thinking we know it all. We're going in to learn. And when we're going in to learn, we're seeking to understand more about that person and the situation that they're in. From that position, we can coach. Otherwise, we're just dictating. We're observing and we're dictating, and that's not coaching. It's kind of a default style that we may have been exposed to, and therefore that's what we might do, but it's definitely not coaching. What we want to be able to do with them, particularly in these challenging kind of times and challenging conversations, underperformers, we want to partner with them. And we want to let them know that we are partnering with them. We're not stepping out in front, criticizing them. We are partnering with them. We're trying to understand what the challenge is here and what we can do to remove that challenge. We want them to identify what that challenge might be. We may have an idea of it based on the empathy map and all that stuff that we've done to understand. But the power of coaching comes when the person is able to unlock the answer themselves. And this is where I think a lot of people get stuck with coaching, because we look for that value that we're providing in the response that we're getting from them. So when we're having a conversation with someone, in fact, I was having a conversation a little earlier today with someone, and they called me a couple of weeks ago, and we played a bit of phone tag, and finally I got back to them. And they were talking to me about an issue that they've got at the moment with their CEO. And we were, I was asking them questions. So they were asking for advice. They wanted that advice. And as I was asking them some questions, you could see that they got there. It was a really quick conversation too. 8-10 minute conversation in the car. They got there because they fundamentally knew those answers. But because we don't often ask ourselves those questions, and it's easier when someone else is asking us a question because they've got some distance between the issue, we don't, it helps to unlock those answers within our brain. Now, that 8-10 minute conversation for that person is going to be a lot more powerful because they got to their own conclusion rather than me, kind of listening to their problem for 3 or 4 minutes and then spouting out into the rest of the conversation with advice from me. They don't need that. They don't. It's not a mentoring conversation. It's a coaching conversation. So I'm going to ask them a bunch of questions. It unlocks answers. They now have those answers because they've come up with it themselves. So they're able to better retain those answers. They are able to better put in place those answers because they've retained them. And I'm going to check in with this person in a couple of weeks and see how they're going. See if the relationship's improved. See if what they came up with is working or does it need a few tweaks here and there. So when we are faced with difficult conversations, going into dictatorial style, I've observed, I think, I know, you should, why haven't you, all that stuff. Get rid of it. Ask questions. The questions then will open up a dialogue where you can still ask those questions that might be on your mind, but in a different way. You may not have to ask that many questions. They may get there in a quicker amount of time to really understand what they need to do next to improve their performance. Okay, the next question that this person had for me was around trust. And they asked me, why is trust so important when leading like a coach? Why is it a key element? Trust is important in any relationship. It's the foundational piece. I absolutely wholeheartedly believe that you cannot build any relationship unless there is trust. Differing levels sometimes, depending on the nature of the relationship and the interactions, but you absolutely need to have trust. And trust in a coaching relationship is about the need to genuinely understand, which we've talked a bunch about, that seeking to understand. But if you are going to ask some questions, which we've talked a lot about, you need to have trust in order to do that. You need to know that the person trusts you enough for you to be able to ask those questions, which might be confronting, might be challenging for them. And that's not going to be because your questions are mean or really kind of pointed. It's going to be because those questions are probably going to make them feel vulnerable. They're not going to know what's the right answer, what's the wrong answer. There is no right or wrong answer. You're just exploring a conversation with them. In order to be able to do that, you need trust, right? Trust has to be flowing through that dialogue and that relationship. So if you know that your trust is a little low with that person, then work to build the trust first whilst you are incorporating aspects of coaching. And at first, if your trust is low, it's going to be clumsy because your ability to connect when there's no trust there is really hard because you might not even want to talk to each other. You might have discounted each other a long time ago and judged each other, but you can still work to rebuild it. First, trust. And then when you know that there's a good level of trust, and I don't have a measure to tell you when there is a good level of trust, you're going to know it. So you will know in all of your relationships, personal and professional, where your trust level is at. And it will fluctuate. Even between intimate partners, right? Trust will fluctuate. We've got to work damn hard to keep trust high. And because we're humans, it's virtually going to be impossible to do so, because at some point or another, someone is going to do something or say something that is going to create a trust debit. Just like a trust account, right? Just like any bank account. We're going to deposit a whole bunch of stuff in there. That's all the stuff we're doing to build trust. And we're going to do that frequently, as often as we can, high quality, right? And sometimes we're going to inadvertently have a few debits, just like any account. It would have been nice to have an account where just stuff's going in rather than it coming out. I don't have one of those. Maybe you do. Tell me how you do that. But we want to make sure that we have an appreciation of trust. And so we're not also setting our expectations too high about what those trust levels are going to look like. Sometimes it's going to be high or higher than others. We never want it to get super low. You know, that term being in the red, you don't want your trust account with a person to be in the red. You want to make sure that there's more credits in there and deposits than what there are withdrawals. And that is everything. It's about the commitments that you make to each other. It's about honoring those commitments. It's about respecting each other. It's about understanding their working style, understanding what's going to positively influence them, knowing and reading their body language around when they're not feeling great and when something's impacted them, being able to address that, being able to move into some level of conflict, sometimes productive conflict. They're all the things that we're going to have to think about when we're working to really solidify trust in a relationship. But if you feel that that trust level is not there at all, then it's going to be really hard for you to coach. So work on that first. That's almost a prerequisite before we start looking at connection, asking great questions, sense making based on our data, and supporting that individual. So then the final question that this person had for me are, you know, Rita, when it's all said and done, what are some really practical ways that I can apply coaching to how I'm leading? So the first thing I would say is connect with your team. Make sure there are high quality and frequent connections that are happening. So, you know, like a Teams chat and a Slack message and a WhatsApp message, that's all great, but are you spending time together as a team? And are you spending time with team members individually? What's your one-on-one cadence looking like? When you are in the one-on-one, what are you talking about? Is it good quality stuff, like focused on their career, their development, strategy, purpose, goals? Or is it kind of transactional KPI data, which we could have read in a dashboard? So make sure it's really good quality connection with the team. Minimize judgment and really seek to understand. That's the headline on connection. Then you're going to ask some great questions. And you're going to have a ratio in your mind that you're going to ask 2 questions to everyone that you answer. So when you are being asked a question and you're tempted to answer, you're going to do that annoying thing. And it's probably going to sound something like, so what are your thoughts on this? If you were in my position, what questions would you be asking? They're not going to like that you're putting it back on them because they're just going to want an answer so they can get on and do what they need to do. But try as hard as you can to ask more questions than what you answer. See how you go, 2-to-1 ratio. Then the third part is that you're going to reflect before you act. Take the time. Unless you are in the business of being a neurosurgeon, take the time, right? Most of us are not doing life-saving stuff. Take the time to really consider all the data that you've got before you act. No one's giving you extra credit points because you made a quick decision. Seriously, they're not. Make the best decision you can at the point in time with the information you have. And the key to that is the information that you have. Do you have all the information that you need to be able to make a decision? Ask yourself that. And if the answer is no, then great. Let's go and find what information you need to enable you to make the best decision you can. So the best decision you can make at that point in time with the information that you have, and really look at your ability to sense make what's going on through that lens. Do you have all the right data? If not, what do you need? Who do you need? And finally, we're going to be asking our team what support they need. We're not going to presuppose. We're not going to support them maybe in the way that we want to be supported. We're going to ask them, how can I best support you? Rather than presupposing what they need. So that brings us to the close of Ask Reader Anything this week. And it was a great question. Really has been good for me to explore, around what does it actually mean to lead like a coach? I take it for granted because it's what I train all the time, and it's hopefully what I'm doing most of the time. My team will be able to tell you that. But I'm hoping that this has given you some inspiration and some courage and confidence to try a few new things to lead like a coach. I'll see you next time. Hey, it's Rita, and we've just finished our podcast this week on what does it mean to lead like a coach? And I shared with you 4 questions that were presented to me by a leader who I'm working with at the moment that wants to look at how they better lead like a coach. So we went through, what are the key criteria that you need to be thinking about? We looked at our little model, so connect, ask, calibrate, which effectively means make sense of the data, and support. And we looked at, trust in great detail. We looked at how we ask great questions and how we formulate great questions. This is not one for you to miss if you really do want to lead like a coach. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you already listened to it, I hope you got a bunch out of it. I hope you've had a play with the empathy map that we talked about too. And I will see you very soon on the next episode of the Deliberate Leader podcast.